So pi over 2 is 90 degrees. So we're wondering which of these graphs is going to be symmetrical on both the left side and the right side of the graph. Which it's going to make the same shape on the left if you were to fold it like a piece of paper on the y-axis. So in order to check that, what we want to check is to see if negative r and negative theta are the same values as if you plug in r and theta. Okay, because if that's true, then you should be able to see like the graph is folding on the y-axis, makes the same shape. So for this first one, for r equals negative sine theta plus 3 theta, we're going to replace r with negative r. We're going to replace sine with negative. We're going to replace theta with negative theta. And it doesn't look good right now, but let's see if we can factor this out. Negative r equals, now this is going to be plus negative 3 theta, right? So let's just factor out a negative 1 from everything. Oops. Actually, before we do that, let's deal with this sine of negative theta. Sine is odd. That means if you plug in a negative value, that's the same thing as if you plugged in a positive value with a negative sign on the outside. So in other words, we can do this. We can write it as sine of theta and make the negative sign come outside. Negative times a negative makes a positive. Okay? Cosine is even. That means cosine of negative theta is the same thing as cosine of theta. So we'll check that out in just a second. Can we make it match? Let's factor out a negative 1 from this side. And I'm factoring out the negative 1 because the signs look really close. And so now we got negative 1 factored out. Look, you can divide both sides by negative 1. So this one checks that box there. That is symmetrical about theta equals pi over 2. Symmetrical about like what used to be the y-axis. Okay, let's do the same thing for each of these. This one here, we got negative r equals sine of negative theta plus negative theta. If we try to simplify, we saw that this is going to make a negative sign come out because sine is odd. And then, look, if we divide everything by negative 1, a balanced step for an equation, right? Comes out to be the same thing. Oh, I added an extra theta there. I don't know where that came from. So that one checks that box. If we plug in a negative r and a negative theta, we get the same thing. So it's symmetrical about what used to be the y-axis. Theta equals pi over 2. Okay, and now if we plug it into this third one, we have negative r equals, now this is being squared, okay? So sine of negative theta, if you square that, that's just going to be sine of theta squared. Because this, if you factor out the negative theta, if you use the fact that sine is odd and take the negative sign on the outside, you're going to square it, so it's going to be even. So it's going to be positive, right? And if you square a negative number, it means you're multiplying it by itself. So negative times a negative makes a positive. So it's going to give us sine squared theta. So we want to keep that in mind. Even though we're plugging in a negative theta, it's going to turn out to be a positive value on the inside here. So we plug in our negative theta here. So negative r equals, this is going to be negative sine squared theta because of that property we just studied. The negative sign is on the outside. That gets squared. Squaring has to happen first. So that's why this negative survives. And now this one, if we were to divide both sides by negative 1, it's not going to match, right? Because this is going to be positive, this is going to be negative, this is going to be positive. So it won't match. This one is not a winner. R equals sine, so let's do the same thing for this one. I think you get the idea, right? This I'll do this one, I'll leave the last one for you to check. This is negative r. Oh. Negative r equals 3 sine squared negative theta plus 5 sine negative theta plus 5 cosine negative theta. Okay, first time doing cosine here in this video. So this is going to be sine squared theta. No issues there, right? Because of what we just talked about up here. Yeah, if you were to yeah, okay, so I don't want to belabor that point. Now, because sine is odd, this is going to change. And also since it's not being squared, this one's going to change from positive to negative 5 sine theta. And then here, cosine's even. So even though that's a negative theta on the inside, it's not like sine. A negative sign doesn't come out. Cosine of negative theta is the same thing as cosine of positive theta. And now we're trying to make a match, so let's make that r be positive. Let's divide everything by a negative, and we can tell right away that it's not going to match this formula because we have a negative 3 here. So we can just stop right there. We know that one's not going to match. Okay, so it takes some time, but just keep in mind those rules about odd and even, and I think you should be okay with this one. Because it's theta equals pi over 2, we need this to equal the same thing as if there was positive r, positive theta.